Hello and welcome to another episode of Tour de Core. And Tour de Core, of course, is the series where we take a deeper dive into WordPress core. And today's topic is walkers. In case you haven't heard of them, WordPress uses walkers in quite a few places in core and themes as well. So we have two things that we want to take a look at today. First of all is just a broad look at walkers and what they are, how they're used, where they're used, and then a deeper dive into menu walkers in particular. So let's get right to it. So, like I said, if you haven't heard about walkers before, then I'm pretty sure you have seen them at least. For example, this in particular is UI that is rendered by a walker. WordPress uses these walker classes in order to render sort of repetitive information and repetitive output that could or could not be nested. In this particular case, I believe that it is the posts walker that is rendering this output, and in particular it handles rendering the TR and everything inside of it. Another place where WordPress uses walkers is of course the WordPress menu, the menu system. So any menu, and pretty much I wouldn't say any, because I'm sure there's going to be some exceptions, but most of the menus that are rendered in WordPress are rendered by a walker class, and in some cases a custom walker class, as we're going to learn a little bit later on. Another example where a walker is used is, I believe, in the pages dropdown function, for example. There will be drop-down pages, I'm sorry. At least I'm pretty sure that this is one of the functions. And of course, when I'm not sure, I'm just going to look it up and find the actual function so that we can see what it's using. Yeah, so walk page drop down tree, which in turn uses a walker. And that's similar for the drop downs that render categories or tags, any terms, and so on and so forth. WordPress uses walkers in really a lot of places, and you will be, if you didn't know until now, you'll be amazed at how many places WordPress uses walkers. So, what is a walker in terms of the code? Well, let's take a look. So, simplest way to do it is by finding one of the classes that is a walker class, and then let's also see which the base walker class which every other walker extends. So the short description is a class for displaying various tree-like structures. Let me zoom in a little bit so it's easier to read. Okay, so various tree-like structures, that's quite broad. And then it gives you further instructions that you should extend the walker class in order to use it, and see some examples below. Child classes do not need to implement all of the abstract methods in the class. The child only needs to implement the methods that are needed. So that's pretty cool. And then we have some variables here, like tree type, db fields, max pages, has children, and then we get to the methods. So we have start level, end level, start element, end element, display element, walk, paged walk, which is different, get number of root elements, and set children. I didn't even know about this function actually. That's pretty cool. Okay, so that's your basic walker. And as you can see, pretty much out of the box, it's only going to display an element. It still has the walk function, the walk method, which the walk method, what it does is you give it some elements and you give it a max depth, and then it's going to run through all the elements and then display the element essentially. And you're gonna see inside of display element, Oh yeah, and of course it does some logic to create a tree of the elements, and this is done based on the DB fields. This property DB fields here, which specifies some things, and we'll take a look at that in a little bit later. Yeah, essentially it creates a tree if it needs to. If it doesn't need to create a tree, so if max depth is -1, then all it's going to do is it's just going to walk through the elements and display them as they are. Otherwise, it's going to create the tree by finding all of the top level elements and then combining, setting up the child elements for each top element. Okay, and then inside of the display element, what happens is that it's going to start walking through the elements, hence walker, and it will, at certain points during the execution, it's going to call the start level and end level, or start element and end element of the class of the walker. So start element is called before the element starts rendering, so that you can add some things to your output before each element. End element is called obviously after the element finishes rendering, and then start level and end level are called before and after you start a new level or end another or end a level. And this will start making more sense as we look at specific examples. So I'd say let's do that. This is the basic walker. Every walker class should extend this class or another class that already extends the walker. So let's find the nav menu walker, because this is what we're going to take a deeper dive into today. It is as we can see right here, and WP includes class-walker-nav-menu.php. And in there, we can see a couple of things. Now, tree type has something in it, and it has post type, taxonomy, and custom. Okay, that doesn't say much so far, at least not to me off the top of my head. DB fields is an array that has the keys parent and ID. So what this does is it lets the walker class, the base walker class, separate the items and create the actual tree structure. And the parent key just says what is the property on each of my elements that contains the ID of the parent element, and then the ID key just says what is the property that contains the ID of my element. Now let's go in here and let's create a simple, let's create our own class, my walker extends walker, and let's grab these DB fields. Actually, what you should do is grab the doc block as well when you're copying a function, a method, or a property. That way it's documented on your class itself. And so, parent could be anything you want. It can be just parent, it could be, post parent, it could be something completely unrelated. It's supposed to be what is in your structure. And actually, first let's have some items. So my items will be an array that has some objects in here. And for example, I'll just use my object in here to make it easier to understand. So my object will have an ID of 1 and a parent of, 2, for example. And then it's gonna have some other things which are less important. All that the walker cares about is that we give it the DB fields array with the parent and ID keys. And if you're always gonna display a flat, a flat structure without parent-child relationship, then that's fine. You can probably skip the parent since it's not gonna be needed. But otherwise, in any case, if there is a chance where you're gonna have a parent element and a child element, then make sure you specify what this particular field is called. And so, in our case, my object has a property of parent and an ID of ID, and so that's what we need to say when we are defining DB fields. And the example of WordPress posts, this would be post parent and ID would be capitalized ID. Okay, so let's move along and let's see what else we have here. Now we have something in start level in the start level method, and we have something in the end level method. Same for start element and end element. So that's pretty cool. Let's take a look at what start level is going to output. So we have the output that we're going to add to, essentially. Then we have the depth parameter and the args array. And so first what they do is, if this is configured, they will add tabs or new lines as necessary based on the depth that we're currently at. And so that way what we're going to get is we're going to get somewhat nicely structured HTML output, which is, in that case, that in particular, not super important to us, but it's good to know what that code is doing. Then it defines some base classes that are going to be applied to our element. Then it adds some more classes. So it applies filters to the base classes, to the default class, with the args and the depth. And then if there are classes, it's going to add the class attribute. And then it just appends to the output any indentation as needed right here. So new line followed by any indentation as needed. And then a UL with class names. And actually let's go back to the admin. And let's go to, sorry about that, I broke my site. Yeah, let's just delete this real quick. Save. So let's just make a drop down menu in here, right? Let's have a custom link. Doesn't link to anywhere. Submenu level 1. And submenu level 2. And we're gonna put it right here under, right here, I guess. Okay, so let's publish this. And now we can see that we have, oh, that's kind of sad. It doesn't support out of the box multiple levels. Okay. Oh, yes it does. Okay, so it just hadn't updated the preview, I guess. Anyway, but now let's take a look at the produced output that we have. Okay, that's not nice to look at. Let's look at it from here. Okay, so this is our menu right here. It has an ID of top menu. Then we have the home item, and then we have the team members item. And in there, what you're going to see is this UL class submenu. And so when we go back to the Walker nav menu, we can see submenu is right here. And watch what's going to happen if I decide to change this, some other class. Just to point out, obviously I'm not suggesting you make changes to WordPress core and then expect them to stay there. This is just for illustrative purposes. And as you can see, some other class appeared in here as well. So this code that we're looking at right here is exactly what is rendering our menu on the front end. And so we have the UL, and then the UL closes, and then we go back to the normal thing. So this is what start level does, is it renders the UL by default. That's what the standard nav menu walker does. It renders the opening UL for submenus. And right now, the default doesn't care how deep you are, what kind of level you are in, and so on. All it does is it just renders a UL with a class submenu and any other custom classes you might decide to add through this filter. Okay, now moving along, we have end level, which goes along with start level, as you can probably expect, and all it does, again, some spacing, and then just closes the UL. Nothing fancy here. And in order to see that this is exactly the code that we're looking at, we can add some comments. And when we refresh, we're gonna see this testing comment right here. There it is. So this is the code that renders the closing UL. Now we move along to some more interesting things. We have start element, which is a significantly bigger function, and there's a reason for that. Again, we're getting output, we're getting the specific item in this case. Remember, before we're talking about the start of a submenu level, and so we don't have one specific item, but in this case we're talking about a specific element, and so we get that item in order to work with it, in order to render the correct output. We again get the depth and the arguments and some ID, the current item ID. And then WordPress starts creating stuff. It starts looking at the item classes for that particular item. So for example, if you have custom classes in your menu item, let's say right here, if I have my custom class is going to appear in here. As you can see, my custom class first at the beginning. And then there's some other items which WordPress adds when the menu items are retrieved from the database, and it adds them based on the type of item. So it will add by default menu item, then it will add menu item type custom. So because this is a custom link, and then it will add menu item object custom, menu item has children, menu item, and then the ID of the item. And so WordPress does that, which is very cool. And so no classes are added here in general unless you specifically hook into this filter. Okay, so I guess I lied. Menu item ID is added in here. Sorry. Then it lets you filter the args for that particular item, which is also nice, because that way we can change the arguments just for this item and then revert them back to, well, I guess we don't have to revert them back because they will be back to what they were, but we can apply specific transformations to the arguments for this particular item. And I feel like that might be how this button is appearing here, this drop down toggle. I could be wrong. Okay, let's take a look. So if we comment this out, and if that, okay, so then this is probably coming from somewhere else, either a custom walker that 2018, 2017. Yes, 2017 is using. So maybe 2017 is using a custom walker. Anyway, not a big deal. Then again, that scroll. Then it creates an extra class attribute. Nothing super interesting here. Then it creates an ID attribute. And then, which this could be a problem. This could be a problem if you have the same menu rendered twice on the same page. So keep that in mind. Then it starts adding to the output. And what it adds at first is just a list item with the ID and the class names, which we can see right here. So a list item with an ID and a bunch of class names. And then it starts creating the attributes for the actual link. You know, the title, target, relation, href, if that's how you're supposed to pronounce it. Then it lets you filter those attributes again. And then it creates the actual HTML for the attributes. Lets you filter the title of the item. And lets you filter the title for the item again, specifically because this title is generic and this title is specific for the title of a nav menu item. And then it adds to the output whatever is supposed to be added before. So the args before, and then the attributes of the anchor itself, attributes of it, and link before, title, link after, closing the anchor tag, and then the after. And then it adds all of this item output to the general output of that we receive in here as the first parameter of start element. And the element, much simpler, does some indenting and then just closes the list item. Now the interesting thing about walkers is that they handle, because of the way that they're designed, they handle rendering tree-like structures very easily. What you're going to see here is that in the display element, if we have a maximum depth, if we're within our maximum depth, and there are child elements for this particular element, after start element is called, so after the start element method is called, which adds all of this, you know, the opening list item as well as the actual anchor itself. After that is called, then we might call start level, and then we display all of the elements for this particular parent. So essentially what you get is that WordPress starts rendering, so the walker will call display element with this first list item, and since it doesn't have any child elements, it's going to display the list item, it's going to display the anchor, and then it's going to close the list item. Then it moves along to the next one. It displays the opening list item tag, it displays the anchor tag, somehow it displays the drop down toggle, which is not a focus right now. But then because it does have child elements, it starts the it calls the start level, which renders a UL submenu, and then it displays the list item for that particular item, and then it displays the anchor tag. Then we have another button because we have another submenu, and so on and so forth. And you can see how this is designed to work very well with structures like this, where it's easy to just use some, there's a technical term for that and it flew out of my mind. You know what I'm saying? Recursion, yes. Through recursion, it makes it super easy to handle potentially nested data and display it accordingly on the front end. because in HTML you need to, you know, close your tags and so on. And then and also where it's up to, and it closes all of the things that it needs to close. So it closes the last list item, then the UL, then the other list item, then another UL, another list item, and then moves along to the next one. So that's pretty cool. That way we don't have to do anything about it. WordPress just does it out of the box. Now that we have taken a look at what walkers are in general, what is the basis of a walker, and one specific case and example, the nav menu walker, comes a time where we need to ask the question, well, why do I care about the walkers? You're gonna say. And you care about the walkers in the cases where you're gonna have some interesting, you know, front end that you need to display, like interesting markup that you need to display that just doesn't fit within what WordPress gives you by default. And you can try it and fiddle with some of the filters, and that might work to some success, you know, to some level of success. That might work. But in other situations, you're just gonna have to create your own walker class, and that's easier than it sounds. And I'm gonna give you a specific example of how we're gonna do that. So a specific weird case that you might have is, let's say that instead of displaying these in this fashion, I want to have, you know, like a big drop down that goes down, and then I have columns of different menus, right? We've seen this on many sites. In the cases where you have a lot of information that you need to present, it makes more sense. You know, it's easier than fiddling with 5 or 6 sub menus here that each pop out their own menu, and it's difficult to navigate, right? If you just use the standard markup that WordPress does, you're probably gonna have a little bit of a hard time getting that to look the exact way that you want it to. And that's where you would go in with a custom walker. Now what I would usually do is I would just come in here and I would grab, this walker as it is, and I would just paste it right here. Okay, so inside of the code, wherever I'm writing, whether it's a plugin or a theme, whatever it is, you know, just change it out. And so now this will be my walker nav menu, and it's going to extend, instead of the base walker, I wanted to extend just the walker nav menu. So far so good. Since I'm not going to change the tree type, which I don't even yet know what it is for. Tree type, where is that even used? Huh, what the class handles. This calls for a search. I don't actually know. Huh. Yeah, that's quite interesting. I have no idea what this is for. Okay, well, since we're not changing it, we're gonna leave it as it is, so delete it, and through inheritance we'll get it back from the walker nav menu. Same with the DB fields. We're working with nav menu still, so DB fields still apply. Then what we're going to want to tweak is start level, end level. Start element, no, I'm pretty sure we're not gonna have to. We could potentially, but I feel like we're not gonna have to. Well, let's leave it in for right now because I'm not sure yet, and let's leave an end element as well. I have a feeling we're probably gonna be able to achieve what we need with just start level and end level, but you know, we can always come back and delete the ones that we're not actually using and modifying. Okay, so now that I have a custom walker, what do? I don't delete the name of the walker for sure. Well, hold on. I I change something, but the change is not reflected here. Now, this is simply because we're not telling WordPress that we want to use our custom walker. There's a couple of ways in which you can use a custom walker, specifically for when talking about nav menus. One of which is to hook into, if we take a look at the open nav menu, which is what renders menus in WordPress. What we can do is filter the attached to the open nav menu args filter, and then override the walker parameter, which is defined right here. This is the better approach if you are writing a plugin. If you're writing your own theme and the walker is inside of your theme, then it just makes more sense to pass the walker directly to the open nav menu. It, doesn't make a lot of sense to filter and stuff, from my experience at least. And it makes it more obvious for anyone that is actually going to be reading the code that you write. And those people will exist, believe me. Okay, so now let's take a look and find where 2017 is calling the open nav menu. Okay, so navigation top, class wrap. Yeah, okay. So it's calling get template part, template parts, navigation. Okay, can we do that? Nice. Okay. Navigation. Oh, sorry. This should not be a folder. This should be just navigation top. So we're gonna copy this and paste it back over into our custom theme. And now in here we can see a whole lot of stuff. And what we actually care about is the open nav menu, which is right here. Now the way that you use the menu just the walker parameter, sorry. The way they use the walker parameter is by passing a new instance, essentially. A new instance of that walker. So we just do new my walker nav menu. And that's it. And so now, if we actually reload this page, we're gonna see that it's now using my custom submenu. Awesome, we changed something. Okay. Now, that's not a super meaningful change though, and that's not exactly what we want to do. So let's get rid of that. Instead, what I would like to do is take a look at the depth parameter, because that's gonna be quite critical. So let's log this into our debug log. And let's do line followed by depth. Yeah. Okay, and so we see depth 0, depth 1. Very cool. So we know that the depth starts at 0 and then it goes up to 1. So essentially, this UL here is at depth 0, and then this UL here is rendered at depth 1. And I guess a simpler way to do this would have been just do depth depth added in here to our classes, and then we can actually see it in the markup. Okay, so we have depth 0 and depth 1. Pretty cool. So in the situation that I was outlining before, what I am going to want to have is one big div that is going to kind of span like this maybe, or something like that, but one div that holds all of my submenus, all of the different columns that I'm going to have in one place. But the thing is, I only want it in where the depth is 0, so that's important to know. And so essentially what we want to do here is if our depth is 0, sorry, if 0 is our depth, because the other conditions are important, if 0 is our depth, then let's add in here a dd wrap. So drop down wrap, which will be empty by default. In this case is going to be, and now if you want this to be nice, you can actually add the indents and the new lines and everything, and you know, actually change what the indentations are and so forth. I'm just going to use what they are. It's not going to look super pretty, like it's not going to indent things correctly, but that's fine for the example here. And then what we do is div class tdc dd wrap. Okay, so we add that in here. And what this is going to do is it's going to add a new div element right before our UL. And as you can see, it's right here. A little bit of a problem that we can see here though is that our div is not actually closing. In order to do that, we need to do the same thing over here in the end level method. And so we're going to do dd wrap is empty by default, and then if 0 is our depth, then dd wrap is gonna equal, oh, let's move indent over here, indent, okay, and then just a closing div. Something to note here though is that dd wrap should be at the end in this case, because we're opening it before the UL and we want to close it after the UL. And so we're also missing, okay, so indent and then a new line here. Okay. Have a comment here so that we can find it in the source code. Okay, so we're opening tdc dd wrap and we're closing it right here. And actually, the way I like to comment this is like that. So this is the end of class tdc dd wrap. Nice and simple, makes it easier to find. Obviously you can get rid of it eventually, but at least during development it's helpful. Okay, so far so good, right? We have our tdc dd wrap, but we only have it once. We don't have it multiple times, even though there is another submenu right here. So far things are going good. Now the next thing is that we are going to want to do, I guess the next thing we should do is just make it show up, right? So give a little bit of styling. And again, this is not ideal, but all I'm going to do is just trick this with just hover. What? Oh, interesting. Okay. We'll just hover. I want this to be visible. So, how is this actually styled? Let's try and use the same selectors more or less. Okay, main navigation list item. Okay. Main navigation list item, hover, display block, and by default we just have display none, of course. So by default we don't want to show it, then on hover we want it to be visible. Also, this should be position absolute. Left 0, right 0, top. Well, let's try top 100%, see what happens. And now we also want navigation top wrap. Okay, so we're gonna, okay, this is relative already, so that's nice. Okay, yes, I will write this in an actual style file so I don't lose it again, right? Makes sense. Okay, just in that menu. And here. Okay, so on hover, so this should be hidden by default, absolute, top 100%, right 0, left 0. And let's add a background to have. Okay, and then when it's hovered, TDC DD wrap should be display block. Okay, so it's not visible right now. For state, hover, and now this should be visible, display block, but we can see it. Width, height is 0. Okay, display block. Okay, so they have some we're gonna have to clean this up a little bit. Yep, so left should not be there, it should not be absolute either. Okay, top auto, left auto, let's reset the Z index. Background, border, padding. Okay, that might do the trick. Okay, so we're starting to see something here, right? That's good. The only problem that I have is something else. Yeah, something else in the way is relative, which in my case I don't really want it to be relative because I want to have this big drop down that spans across the whole width of the page. So I just need to override this as well. Position static. Okay, that will do the trick for that. Okay, so now we have something, even though it's not quite what we want it to look like. So that means we're gonna have to change a little bit of this stuff. Let's move this over here. Oh, no, man, that should be down here. Okay. So now this, what I should do is let's float it to the left, and we'll just assume, just for the sake of it, we're gonna assume that we're gonna want 3 columns in here. So width is gonna be 33.33%, and we can have some padding on this thing. from everywhere, and then padding right. And box sizing, border box. Padding right, let's put some 10 pixels in between. 20 actually. No padding on the last one. Obviously, there's, you know, more modern ways to do this. For example, you could use columns and so on, but let's just do it the quick way for the sake of brevity. Okay, so now what we have here is one list item that is as a column, and then we still have the UL underneath it, which is not ideal. So instead, what we need to do here is that we need to override the other ULs as well. So the third level of ULs. So position relative. Let's just have a preview right here. So left auto, okay. And then what else we need to override? Top auto, top auto, left auto, okay. And then for the list items in there, we're actually gonna want to have display block. Yeah, and this is overriding our styling a little bit. So what we need to do is we need to have another level of list items here. And actually the way we can fix this is by changing this one. So main navigation, list item, TDC, DD wrap. Direct UL directly. Let's see if that fixes it. So change this one. Don't freeze. Hello? Chrome? You here? You are here. Okay. Change it just for this one. There we go. Now it looks a little bit better. Not ideal still, but tiny bit better, right? Width. Yeah, we don't want this width. So UOA. Okay. And actually, in order to not break anything else, like in case we stop using our walker for some reason, or we mix and match, like sometimes we use the walker, sometimes we don't use the walker, what we should do is a couple of things. Specifically, well, when we use the walker, what we should do is we should add in here to our classes something that says that this should be just for the walker. And then also in the CSS we can change it so that we use TDC DD wrap in all of our selectors, but out of scope in this case. So just a warning though, if you are planning to use your custom walker in some pages and no custom walker in other pages, then it'll be a sane idea to make sure that you sandbox your CSS rules so that they only apply to when your walker isn't being used. And so main navigation UOA needs to be display block and with 100%. Okay, let's see how that looks now. Okay, a little bit better. For state hover, okay. Oh, actually, Yes, that's something I should have thought about. We don't want the list item to be floated, we want the submenu to be floated and limited to that width. Yep. Yeah, a little bit better. Still some bugs, visual and stuff. Not ideal. Okay, and now the cool thing is that for state hover. Okay, so this moves out of the way. Left 100%. Okay. Did I not add that in there? Okay. Position relative left 0. And so we'll override the left 0 here as well, so that when we hover over, it doesn't break much. And another thing, let's fix this. This is too much. Top 100% is too much. So, let's see, what's the height of those guys? 49. Okay, that should work better. 236, top 49 pixels. Okay, there we go, a little better. And now what you can do with this is that when you go back to your menu, what you can do is just add more items. Another submenu, right? And you can add it right in here, like so. Third column, add it in here. And then just move all of these under each of your columns. What you should end up with, ideally, is a layout where you're gonna have the 3 columns. Not right the way I expected them to be. Okay. So this is correct. Oh, right. Yes. So that was supposed to be UL list item, the last one. The list item here. There we go. Yeah, again, there's still some styling issues, but what you get is one column that has items underneath it. Potential problem with this? No, it should be fine. Obviously, there's some styling issues, like this hover shouldn't be like that. But excuse me, the cool thing that you can do is that you can make these completely not show up on the front end. You can go into the start element function, right? And then let's take a look at what level this is at each, right? So classes, let's also add another class for depth. So we can take a look at what the depth is at each item. And so here we have depth 1, cool. Then we have depth 2 at the list items. And depth 0 is at the very top, obviously. So depth 1 is the depth at which we have our columns rendered. So what you can do here is that you can say if 1 is our depth, then don't even render this. Like don't even add this to the thing, right? Like if 1 is our depth, don't add the anchor tag at all. We don't need it. Oh, come on. Apparently 1 is not the depth I was looking for. Oh, sorry. So if 1 is not the depth, sorry, then go ahead and add it. Otherwise, just ignore it. And what you can see here is now we don't have that column, which in here in the back end you might have just a custom link. That way you can just have a custom link that doesn't link to anything and use it purely as for organizing things. But of course you can still have it and have it linked somewhere, or you can hide it. It's up to you. But the cool thing is you can change that and the way that it functions. And of course, if we're not even going to use this method, if we're not going to change anything in start element and end element, we can just get rid of it. And now our custom walker that adds, you know, the ability to have a drop-down menu, a mega drop-down or whatever it's called, with a fixed amount of 3 columns with just this little bit of code right here on the PHP side of things, of course. You know, we're just adding a little bit of extra markup and then we're able to style things much more easily than if we just try to use the standard markup that WordPress provides. And that's about it. I think that displays what you can do, a little bit of what you can do with menu walkers in WordPress. And obviously from here on, imagination is your limit, you know, sky is the limit. You can go completely crazy, or you can make just a little tweak that will make your life easier though when you're trying to implement the markup that you have within WordPress. Now, it's important to point out, you also have to consider the user experience for whoever is going to be using this, you know, whoever the site administrator is going to be, because with the more complex menus, as there might be better tools for the job. You know, one option is to use a plugin that gives you a better UI for creating those sorts of more complicated menus. Another option is to not use the menu UI at all. Depending on what your use case is, that might be a possibility or not, where you can build, you know, your own interface of some sort. Or you could, you know, in theory as well, you could just hard code the whole menu or a certain section from the menu. But yeah, so think about when you're developing things, also think about who's going to use that thing that you're creating. Because, you know, for me, it's very easy to say, here it is, you just need to have this structure. Make sure you don't add a fourth, you know, element here, or something might break, right? Not ideal for the user. Things need to be foolproof so that they're more difficult to break. So yeah, that's my advice. Just think about who's going to use it and whether or not the thing that you're building is going to be easy enough for them to use or not. With that being said, I'm going to wrap up for today, and thank you for watching, and I will see you next week on April 15th at the same time, 10 p.m. Bulgarian time, noon some other time. It's noon somewhere in the world, right? I forgot what it is. PST, I think. Noon PST. So yeah, I will see you then. Once again, thank you for watching and have a good day. See ya.